Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours. This is the place we answer your tech questions 7 days a week. Let's get right to our questions. Courtney, what do we have to lead off today?
Well, coming in all the way from Germany and Berlin, L. Wilson Spyro says, any advice on getting a Mac Studio M2 Ultra to remember my display order on restart when multiple identical Blackmagic devices are connected? SwitchRes X didn't help, hoping there's a solution other than purchasing 6 inline EDID emulators.
Mickey McAtour is going to start off helping you out. Mickey?
Yeah, this is certainly an issue that many come across with specifically macOS, wherein it defines a display output or even an audio output by its device name as opposed to its unique ID. I was going to mention EDID emulators, but you mentioned you don't want to purchase 6 of them. But unfortunately, you would need some sort of device that can emulate or spoof EDID device names. And that would be either EDID emulators or other HDMI devices that can give unique device names to each of its inputs. An example would be an HDMI matrix. Some higher end HDMI matrix boxes are able to provide unique device names on each of their outputs. So either way, you'll need some sort of hardware device that can do that.
Alex Lindsay, you have some help?
Yeah, and if you do that, I agree with Mickey. But if you do it buy one with a good return policy, I have an 8x8 Blackbird, and I cannot connect my studio to my switcher through the Blackbird. So it is, all I get is black. I've done everything I can think of, redefined the EDIDs. There's something about that pass-through that hasn't worked, and I've had some EDID emulators work and some not. So, buy one, see if it works, but I think otherwise you are going to be stuck, and it has to do with the negotiation of both of them are expecting to have to negotiate with the far side. So that's why it's happening, is they're going, hey, what do you want? And they're like, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? So now if you're going to other Blackmagic hardware, it should be fine. It's the hardware, it's going to the switchers that I've had specific problems with passing through the Blackbird. So we'll see what happens next. I'm about to convert everything to SDI again. So we'll see if that fixes some of the issues.
Courtney Gooden, do you have some thoughts?
Oh, just spitballing a DIY idea. How about if you only have your main monitor up first when you boot the Mac, and then you turn on power to each of the Blackmagic devices that are connected one at a time in the order that you want to see them, in the screen order that you want them to appear. Will it assign them in the correct order, or does it randomly pick a screen output to assign them once it sees power come on an HDMI output?
Does any of this have to do with just the regular display settings? Because I've been lucky. My monitors come on the same array every time. I understand you're dealing with the Blackmagic devices, not direct monitors, but there's some.
It's the Blackmagic devices specifically. Like mine all come on. All of mine connect to monitors, except for one. And they all come up the same every single time. So I've got 4 monitors connected to my Mac Studio, and all 4 of them come up exactly the way I expect them to every time I turn them on. Even if I unplug one, it'll turn off, and they'll come back on again as soon as I do.
That's exactly the same behavior I've been seeing. So yeah, but this is more complex.
3 of them go into the Blackbird. 1 goes directly to the switcher. That's the one that I use to display stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, hopefully those are some ideas to pursue, although buying that many devices probably isn't the best solution. Hope you find something. And if you do, come back and let us know what it is somebody else.
Fortunately, EDIDs are not that expensive. Yeah. they're pretty inexpensive solutions.
Does somebody sell them in a 6-pack?
Yeah,
Let's go on to our next question.
Next one comes in from Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia. It says, I was advised that when mixing audio for a house of worship, it's important to monitor how it sounds online and also how it sounds in your car. Is this true?
Let's start with, we've got a long list of people raising their hands to help you out here. Jeff Francis is going to begin for us. Jeff?
But no matter what, if you're doing both in-house sound and online sound, you need to be able to monitor the online and mix the online separately, because it will be different than what you need in the venue, in the sanctuary. So there are lots of things that may be loud enough acoustically and don't need to be amplified and mic'd. So drums, I don't know if you're contemporary worship or traditional worship, but oftentimes organ is not, it's amplified completely separately if you're a traditional sanctuary. So you need to have a means to get that into the online stream and monitor that. So you definitely want some additional room miking. Remember that room miking should be close to the platform and the altar, not in the back of the room where the soundboard is, unless you have the means to adjust all the timing of that, because sound will take a while to get through your sanctuary. It'll be late if you put those room mics in the very back of the room. Definitely when the experience of being in the house of worship, we're used to music being loud and then speech being quieter, but that will not work in the online. So definitely all of the spoken word things will need to come up in relation to the music. As far as checking it in your car, I mean, it's a good idea, but if you get a decent mix for the online, it should translate to all those spaces.
Marty Atias.
So imagine you're the head chef in a kitchen. And you're overlooking in a commercial kitchen, and you're overlooking the cooking of all of the different components that go into a dish, but you never look at the final assembly and the dish that's going out to the customers. So things happen online where you can do a mix and you can send it out to YouTube or whatever, and they're doing things to it. But if you never listen to the final product, you don't know what's being delivered. There are a number of things that are different about mixing for streaming than mixing for in the room. For example, the dynamic range is completely different. In the room, you could be as loud or as soft as necessary in that particular room, but online, the total dynamic range is about 10 dB. And so you really need to keep your levels within that dynamic range. Also, if you have a band in your service, music performance, especially something like with drums or something dynamic or loud, there's a lot of energy coming off of those instruments that are naturally heard in the room, and what you're doing with the sound system is reinforcing those components that are not loud and need to come up to be properly balanced. But online, nobody can hear those acoustic instruments, and so the mix is completely different. So yes, you definitely need to be able to monitor what's going out and what people are listening to. Listening to your car, I don't know if how are you going to do that? I think that just doing a good basic mix is important. And what people are listening to, they may be listening to earbuds, laptop speakers, stereo system. You really can't control that. So just doing a good basic mix is the best you can do.
Chris Gillin.
Yeah, everything that Marty and Jeff said is 1,000% correct. I mean, the real thing, and I've done a lot of this, the real thing to really be aware of is that, very much like what Jeff was saying, is that when you're in the room, okay, so much of this stuff may be hitting you loud enough just at an acoustic volume that it's really, really just, it's fine. Maybe it's too loud just even acoustically, right? The real way to control all of this is you have a separate broadcast engineer. I mean, in any kind of like big streaming event that I've ever done, there's like a complete separate audio team. There's a full split at the stage. This is all going independently directly to a broadcast team. The other feed is going to front of house and to the audio team that's doing the actual event in the live room, I would say it's important, the car thing of the car test is cars are acoustically great environments, okay? So when people are listening in their bad rooms and you go into the car, you're in a closed, controlled environment, windows up, obviously. Like when you're in there, your seats, the shape of the car, you're in kind of a big like padded diffuser, right? So you're getting very direct sound, and it really, really shows you what low end is doing. A lot of people need to really understand that low end, if you're mixing in a room and your speakers are not correct, or you're not understanding what low end is doing in headphones, your speakers can be coupling to the desk, to the floor. You can have a wildly wrong level as far as like what's actually happening. So people like the car test because it gets you away from the screen and just lets you hear that stuff.
Mickey Macachor.
Yeah, great points from everyone. It's very important because whenever, like, say, you're doing a live stream, whatever the audience is hearing online is being compressed with data compression somehow, be it the AAC compression or even Dolby Digital is compressed. Dolby Digital and Dolby Digital Plus, even Dolby True HD is compressed. And as with what Chris mentioned, you want to listen to what the audience is hearing, and that's why in a just looking at the higher end scale in a high end broadcast environment, if say a show, a broadcast is being mixed in Dolby, or even like in a film environment, what we listen to on the mixing stages in Dolby, if like full Dolby stages, is going through a Dolby encoder, and then that encoded signal is going through a Dolby decoder, and we're listening to that decoded audio. And that's what we're mixing to. That's what we're monitoring when we're mixing, so that we know what's happening at the other side of things. And just to touch on the dynamic range side of things that Marty mentioned earlier, a broadcast mix that say is destined for YouTube. YouTube wants minus 14 LUFS integrated for content that's on their platform. That is really loud. If you take a front of house mix and just measure that, that's usually going to land somewhere in the minus 30, 33, 36. Maybe a loud mix would be at minus 27 LUFS. That's a huge difference compared to minus 14 LUFS for say YouTube. And then another thing with YouTube is recently, a couple months ago, they added a feature that's called stable volume, which adds dynamic processing to what the audience hears. And that if people use that, and I believe it's on by default on mobile devices, that will affect what the audience is hearing. And you also want to be able to know what's happening on that side. So having the feed from YouTube coming back to your desk, so that you can switch over and just monitor that real quickly, is really helpful.
Jeffrey Powers.
Going to your car from a live feed, because you probably want to do this while it's happening. What I normally do is I just take my iPhone and a pair of AirPod Pros, and then go out to the hallway and then listen to what's going on, only for a second, so I can run back in, make any changes. If I got a regular iPad, I can actually make the changes as I'm going. You got to remember that there's always going to be like a 10 to 30 second difference or longer when it's coming through any type of streaming unit, but it gives you that quick indication that something's wrong and needs to be listened to. So, and of course, the car on the way home after the event, just to do some sort of RFI.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, and remember to be the advocate for the audience as well. Sometimes you got to remember that they're not hearing the stuff that you're hearing in the room. So having what we call a nat sound mic or a in-room microphone, so you can bring that up so they get a taste of what's going on, especially if somebody starts talking from the audience and you can't get a mic over to them fast enough. And so if the audience is listening and they're only hearing one side of the conversation, so it's a matter of presenter training as well. Having the presenter make that audience member wait until a mic runner can run a mic over to them so they can actually hear, because in the room we're hearing, the person talking, but the person down the hall that might be in the cry room or nursery or whatever, they're not hearing that other side of the conversation at all. So I've had to do this in our house of worship where I'm like, hey, there's audience members who like to talk, and it's like, hey, wait for the mic, because they're like, I'm loud enough, I don't need a mic, people can hear me in the room. And it's just like, it's not about you, dude, it's about the rest of the world that's on the other side. So audience training and presenter training is important as well.
Hopefully that helped you, Harold. A lot of extraordinarily talented people gave you their opinions about this, and I think you can take all of these opinions to the bank. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from New York City or Brooklyn in New York City. Mike Edwards wants to know, morning everyone, what does the panel think of Auto Presentation Switcher, or APS, a companion-operated Keynote, PDF, and PowerPoint control module for Companion?
Jeffrey Powers, start us off.
Hey, Mike. Definitely, I love this idea. I've been in many situations where we go from presenter to presenter to presenter, and being able to put presentations into a staging area and then push it over from there is something that I've always strived to do. We've done it in many different ways, so being able to have that on the companion level to push it over is great. Of course, if you're doing it one-man band type style, this might be a little bit tougher to do, but if you're doing it in production as somebody's getting on stage, it's going to be perfect for what you need.
Alex Lindsay.
I would typically get some kind of hardware switcher or hardware device that's going to let you switch between things, or put up another image and then switch them underneath that image. Because usually you're not going from one presentation to another. You're going from a presentation to a hold slide that says, okay, this is the next person coming. Then you're going to come out to that presentation. This might work, but I think that in general, what happens is it's not just going from presentation to presentation. You're working on the other presentations, or you're building something else, and you're, like my experience has not been, going from one to the next, like in the way that this works. The only, I probably wouldn't use it. I guess I would say I can see the use case for it. But I would very quickly, if I'm trying to do this, I probably wouldn't go down this path. Now, the other thing that I would say is that this is a bigger answer than what you're asking, is one presentation after another is really going to hammer your audience. Like they're not going to, if you're going to not interact with the audience and try to go from one presentation to another, just record them and send them a video. We did all these PowerPoint presentations because we didn't have, video. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have all these other things. It's not like, it is just so brutal to sit back there. And if you're doing these and you're doing them one after the other without any Q&A, because if you have Q&A, as soon as you have Q&A, you don't need this, right? Because you're going to put up some other slide. You're going to have it sitting there. You're going to do Q&A. You're going to come back to it. So you're not but if you're doing one presentation right after the other, just look out at the audience and see if are they checking their email? Are they texting? Are they sleeping? These are all things that we see pretty commonly when people build dense presentation pipelines. So, just really think hard about the process of why you would need this. And then again, I think that you're going to get a much more professional look by spending $300 on a A10 Mini and just plug different stuff into it and switch back and forth between slides and everything else.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, I agree with Alex. I looked at this. And the problem you run into, typically in all the presentations, live presentations that I've gone to, is the speaker will arrive with the presentation on their own laptop, and they'll want to plug their own laptop into the HDMI port when they get to the lectern. And that is a problem for them.
They're often sitting there. They're often sitting there still working on it until right before they walk up. I'm not that I would ever do that.
Yeah. And this is software that has to reside on your you have to use a single presentation computer because it puts a bumper slide up, and it works on both Mac and PC, and it works with staging. You can you use your presentation computer. It puts a bumper slide up while you change from Keynote to PowerPoint or whatever in the background, and I guess you've got to have them both running, and then it switches between the two. And then sticks it to sticks that presentation to the external screen going out, while maintaining that a single video connection to that projector. But frequently, more often than not, you'll get one speaker will finish their presentation, they'll unplug their laptop, and they'll go back to their seat, and the next person comes up and plugs their laptop in. So you need something to put that bumper slide up, or just a slide that has the agenda up or whatever to hold the audience's attention until the next person gets plugged in and set up and the video is solid. And once they've figured out how to start their presentation and it goes full screen, then you can crossfade to it on your $300 ATEM switcher, and everything will be cool. And this software is priced. There's a free download to try it if you're a one-man band and you're basically going to have everything coming off a single laptop. $40 for one. I don't know whether that's a month. It says billed annually, but it doesn't say if that's a monthly fee that's going to be billed annually or an annual fee. It just says $40 billed annually for one, and then there's that's for APS. Then there's other things that they bundle with it, which is a queue timer and a bundle of the two. And they have other software that does video playback as well as this presentation, doing PowerPoint presentations and keynotes.
Mickey Mekachor.
Yeah, totally agree with Alex and Courtney there. And you don't even necessarily need a separate switcher to cut between the different presentations. If your switcher already has multiple MEs, then you can do a subcut there before you take it into your program or take it off to your iMag. And one thing to add, and this may sound petty, but it does raise a concern for me, is that just looking at their website, they have a typo here. And if a company cannot bother or does not have the time to look at or fix typos, would they have time to support me? Would they have time to fix things if things break? Little red flags like that raises concern to me. Like, again, it may sound petty, but they can't do such a simple task, such as proofreading their copy on their website. So just think about it.
That word is actually
Powers?
correct, Mickey, because it stands for people that are bored with the keynote. So keyboard.
Jeffrey, you wanted to come back in for a second?
Yeah, really quick, and it's a different angle on that whole keyboard thing. It is keyboard. From what I'm reading, it's keyboard shortcuts, and they're saying you can use a Stream Deck, you can use Companion, but to use Companion, to use Stream Deck, you're using the hotkeys. That means that if the focus gets off of the program, then when you hit that Stream Deck button, that Companion button, it won't work because it's trying to do a hotkey outside of the program. So keep that in mind. I don't think that they have a specific app that was made for the Stream Deck that allows that to work.
As someone who's done a couple hundred conference presentations, I will also say that for me, being in control of my laptop to do that was pretty important, only because I rehearsed that way. As you get into bigger stages, you will have somebody in the background who wants to take control, and if they're good, and if you have rehearsal time, as they do for big company keynotes where they work it out so that you know exactly what's going to happen next, that can be very effective, and I, in those cases, would give control up. But for most of the smaller rooms that I've been in, giving up control over the advancement of my program is something I only do when I'm kind of forced to, because I want to be able to delay or whatever, and I don't want to have to say, okay, next slide, and hope it comes up. That kind of interferes with my rhythm. That's just personal for me. Next question.
Next one comes in from Simon Ray in Midlands in the United Kingdom. He says, what are cheap ways to improve my audio if I have to work on a laptop in a small room for the day?
Jeff Francis, start us off.
So you're looking for cheap ways. This is something I did probably a decade ago when I was in a hotel room and I had to get on a meeting and I had nothing with me but a laptop. So I built the old school pillow fort around my laptop to block outside sound and keep reflections down. That's pretty cheap. So there you go.
We talk a lot in the voiceover community about pillow forts. Everybody starts with them. Christian.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Jeff. I mean, the real thing is, first off, I don't know what the context of your work is. So one, are you editing? What are you doing? Are you recording in this room? If you're recording, yes, the acoustics of the room are incredibly important. That is everyone. If you are recording anything, anywhere, the sound of your room, it reflects so heavily down the entire line of your production. It's really, really the most important thing. I cannot stress this enough. But if you're trying to do this just on editing and something like that, and you need a small temp editing suite, use headphones that you know. Use things that you know. And I would try and keep it as familiar as possible.
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, is it going to be recording or is it going to be listening? The biggest thing is to take that big room and turn it into as small of a room as possible. Sometimes you can do that by, if the desks are movable, you can turn the desk around, get it towards a corner, being able to move around furniture, making pillow forts and things like that are definitely going to help make the room smaller so you can listen or record. And then, of course, having a good pair of headphones as well, just in case, so you can go back and forth, and maybe even your car. I don't know.
Alex?
The thing that I've done the most of is I go into a room, and for many offices, I had Sonics. These are foam panels that you just throw on the wall, and they look like this. So you see this. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. I'm in the wrong thing, I think. Let's see. Oh, maybe not. Anyway, so these are this kind of these are here, and you can buy them in 4x8 sheets. And I would just throw them everywhere. And then I'd figure out the bass traps, somewhere. I have so many staple holes in them because I just take them off one office and move to another office and stick them back up again. And, are they perfect? Would I do voiceovers with them? Probably not. I mean, there's a whole bunch of EQ issues that they have. Do they cut down on most of my reflections? 100%. So if you're able to, so just throwing them up there, you can also, CJ found that he could buy, they do the exact same pattern, but it's for foam inserts for your mattress, and it costs, of course, like half the price, per square foot. So that's another solution to look for mattress foam, and you can put it up on the walls. And that's a really easy way to do it. It's not super expensive. What I have here, because my wife won't let me staple stuff to these walls, is I have moving blankets that are hanging, and so those moving blankets are hanging. I get ones that are, they're 90 pound, and they are white on one side and black on the other. So don't get them colored. Moving blankets oftentimes come blue and orange, and that'll affect your camera. So you get those. Think about fullness. So one of the things that I do is you can't get these moving blankets with grommets. So you have to go through the process of putting grommets in them. And then you can hang them from, you can buy little stands that will hold these things for $20. And as you pull them in, 100% fullness means that there's twice as much fabric as there is the distance. So for 100% fullness, you'd have a 10-foot area, and you're using 20 feet of fabric. The more fullness you have, the more it's going to absorb. Again, this is great for you just having meetings without any reflections. It's not going to be acoustically accurate, because you're going to be pulling out a bunch of your mid-tones and some of your high tones and not enough of your bass. So those are things you have to think about. But if you're just trying to knock reflections down, those two solutions I found to be pretty effective.
Jeff Francis. Oops, Jeff, you're muted.
Can't hear you.
Sorry. In my studio here, I have first wall reflection. I have actual acoustic panels on the walls there. But for office hours, it was a little bit roomy for my voice. So what I have is, you can't see because it's out of shot, is an old polar fleece blanket that is I can put up and hang, and it's 8 feet tall and 6 feet wide, and it sits to my right side and just kind of kills a bunch of sound over there. Is it great acoustics? No, I take it down when I'm actually doing audio work, but I put it up for when I need to be on meetings and kill a little bit of that room reflection in here. So as long as it's out for camera, doesn't matter how ugly it looks. And that was basically free. It's an old blanket. I poked a hole in the seam and I ran a piece of EMT tubing through it that I can quickly put it up and suspend it that way.
And Simon, in reading through this, you don't say you're working with a microphone. You're just saying you're working on audio. So if it's all monitoring, I think you're kind of in the world of headphones at some point to try to get any kind of clarity on that. I've done everything in a hotel room possible for recording audio. The first order of business is to try to find enough pillows and things like that. Second order of business is actually strip the mattress and put it across a corner and use that as your voice booth. It is a pain in the tail, and you have to be strong enough to be able to wrestle a mattress around. But it will provide more baffling if you need that. Also, if you have a lot of clothes in their closet, standing in front of those clothes hanging in a closet will knock back some reflections. But all of those are kind of, it's the best you can get for recording in a not controlled circumstance. And it's tough. Courtney, you had another thought?
I was just going to elaborate on what Jeff was saying. Is if you're going to hang a blanket from a pole or something, make sure you gather it together with a lot of pleats in it. Because if just a flat blanket held is only a thin blanket, it's not going to absorb very much sound or reflection. So you want to, if you have a material like a curtain or something like that, make sure it's got pleats in it, like the one that's over my shoulder there, which will help absorb the sound more because it puts more sections of that cloth between you and the reflective surface.
There you go. Hopefully all those suggestions help. Simon, next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, he says, has anyone used Dante controller on macOS Sequoia, the latest OS?
Chris Jolin, start us off.
Yeah, I have not used it on Sequoia. I use it on Sonoma every day, and it's been incredibly stable. I'll say every once in a while it will hiccup, and it's really just like a reboot, and then it just jumps right in and has been great. I would say if you're looking specifically for an old version, if you can't find one online, just contact the company, and frequently there will be some kind of hidden menu where you can access older updates.
Mickey Makacher.
Same with Chris. I myself have not tried it because it is not specifically stated by Audinate as supported yet. So I do not feel the need to test something that isn't supported.
There you go. Oh, Alex, you had a thought.
Good time to update, especially if you have a lot of audio tools. The good time to update your macOS is typically March of next year, like so at the earliest, and possibly 1 or 2 years after that. It has some stuff to do with Apple cleaning some stuff up, but there's a lot of tools that are subsystems that are very delicate, and some of them have a lot of technical debt, and it takes them a long time to get everything up to speed. So being in a rush to update, especially if you're doing audio, is pretty dangerous. Like you're going to have problems all the time. I know a lot of audio engineers that are 2 or 3, and Mickey will probably talk about it, but 2 or 3 or 4 versions behind, mostly to allow everything there. And I will say Apple's audio subsystems have been substandard for a couple years now. Like there's a lot of things that they've broken that a lot of people are still trying to figure out how to fix.
Mickey?
Yeah, certainly what Alex mentioned, a lot of studios just need systems that work. So if they don't need to update, they will keep it as is. I still support a couple studios that use Pro Tools simply as a tape deck, record and playback. And some of them are still running Snow Leopard. Again, they're just using the machine as a tape deck. And just want to add Sweetwater for the past couple of years has kept a nice database of software and hardware tools and their compatibility with newer versions of OSs, and they have quite a comprehensive list of hardware and software there.
As we're in the midpoint of the show, let me remind you that your votes do count and your questions count every day when you ask them. If you don't know the system in the back end for getting your questions in, it's incredibly easy. You can go to askofficehours.global. You can use the QR code that is going to pop up on the screen in the lower corner right now. Just take a picture of that. And as always, your votes on those questions, should you decide to go in through the formal Mukana system and become kind of a member of the Office Hours community, you can get into the back end and vote on those questions. And that's how we prioritize what we get to first, quickest, and what we spend the most time talking about every day. So participate. We'd love to have you involved. Let's go on to our next question.
Next one comes in from Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina. He says, looking for a new USB hub for the MacBook Pro. I just connected to my 3 external monitors. I need more ports now. Which OWC model should I be looking for?
Chris Jolin, start us off.
I love my OWC dock. I have the 11 port model. There are some different choices. The real thing is these are all the exact same quality. It's just about facilitating what you actually need connection-wise. So for me, I'm running like a just USB-C to HDMI adapter out of one of my ports to go to a larger display. And yeah, I would just say probably do that. But it's been a great thing. I would just go on. I think it's $229 or something, but it's been really great. And it's definitely the heart of my whole connectivity here. So,
Mickey.
Yeah, I totally agree with Chris there. All our machines in the studio have the 11-port Thunderbolt dock from OWC. I really like it because aside from having the Thunderbolt host connection that goes to the computer, it has an additional 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports. And of course, with Thunderbolt 4, it is also compatible with USB 3.1, I believe, or 3.2 protocol. I don't remember exactly. So this is my go-to, but in situations where I need 10 gig Ethernet, I would go with the Thunderbolt Pro dock because it does have that 10 gig Ethernet. It has less USB-C Thunderbolt ports and also less USB-A ports, but it does have the 10 gig. So if you need 10 gig, Thunderbolt Pro dock. If you need a lot of Thunderbolt ports, then the 11-port Thunderbolt dock for me.
Jeffrey Powers.
Couple things you didn't say here, Bo. First of all, what kind of monitors are you using? Are they going to be 4K? Are they 1080p? Are they larger? Yes, the OWC works. I'm going to give you an alternative, Pluggable. Pluggable does a great job with their ports inside because it's really about the chipset inside of these docks. And of course, they're not full, they're not Apple chipsets. They're third-party chipsets for additional sound, for additional drivers and things like that. OWC also has a little dongle. It's a USB-C to dual display adapter. And with that, you would then get the display link drivers that you would put onto the computer. So you can run more than 2 monitors, especially if one of those monitors is a USB-C enabled monitor. That way you can have 3, 4, 5, 6 different monitors because it's running through that software rather than through the chipset, because there is a limitation on certain Macs. So those are the 2 that I do. But the other question is, what other ports do you need? Do you need additional USB? Do you need additional USB-C? What else are you plugging into it, or is it just the monitors? Because if it's additional stuff, you also have to remember that takes a lot, even though there's a 40 gigabit pass-through, you still have to worry about what you're plugging in, because that can definitely bog down your computer.
And I wonder if, I'm not going to do a show of hands, but if you polled whether anybody on this panel has any ports open still on any of their Thunderbolt docks, I'd like to know about it. Mine seem to fill up the day after I put them into service. Just the way things are. Next question.
Next question comes in from Gabriela Exechal Mistiera in Sault Ste. Marie. She says, Alex, what headsets for pro comms use, like the ones like the Jans someone talked about, can turn off when the mic boom is lifted up?
Alex?
So I believe the 300s from Clearcom will do that. I haven't tried it lately, so I remember them being that way, but I haven't needed to pull them up. So usually when I don't usually turn my headsets off by pulling the arm up. I will admit that I don't like that mechanical process, so I leave them down and I'm keying in and keying out to get in and out of comms. I'm not using the headset arm. But I remember turning them off by accident by swinging the arm up, because I was talking to somebody on a phone or something like that, and then no one could hear me. Now, it may have been that they're so directional that they weren't there, but I thought that there was a switch on that's switching them off when they go all the way up. I know a lot of the other headsets that I use do that, but I believe that the 300s from Clearcom will turn off if you turn that thing all the way up to parallel to the headrest.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I've been on some shows where we've used those Hollyland models, and there's actually a new model from Axoon that's called the Como, that they call it flip to mute microphone. So these are all-in-one units, whereas on the Riedels that we use here in Seattle at the Tenacious Ventures, those guys that we did the show on, I'll use these where it's a dual muff with the boom arm, but this is not a mechanical. It relies on the gating to close it. And on some of these higher end ones, like the HMD 26-2s, so you get the flip up, and it also allows you to flip the earpiece on the side, so you can listen to one thing. But yeah, when you flip this thing up like this, it's the gating so extreme that you can have it mute. It's not going to pick up anything else besides a high signal to noise. So your signal has to be loud enough for it to open up the.
Mickey, you wanted to get in on this?
And yeah, just to add, as someone who's had to repair a bunch of these, those switches on the flip-up microphones do not last long typically.
Okay. So there's a downside. Next question.
From a fellow named Guy Cochran in Seattle. He says, for the live benefit with Toad the Wet Sprocket and Bare Naked Ladies, what was the audio chain? And how did you keep it from slipping off the wet sprocket?
Jeff Francis.
So this was video playouts and live bands, and it was both Toad the Wet Sprocket, Bare Naked Ladies, and a few guest artists, Edwin McCain and some others. And not only did Toad and Bare Naked Ladies play by themselves, but they actually all came together at the end. So what was kind of crazy was Toad, of course, had their own mixing console from their tour. Bare Naked Ladies had a separate mixing console, separate audio engineer, and the two of them worked together collaboratively to mix the entire group. So you can see here in this, Bare Naked Ladies came into a CL3. Toad Wet Sprocket went into a Allen Heath D-Live. It would be lovely to have a sub-mixer for those, but actually we took the CL3 and went out into a stereo input of the D-Live to pass it through. Those went into Alex's Scorpio, and then that allowed him to have control over gain before it went to the stream, and also to dip that and mute that when video playback was happening so that the groups could do sound check still and change out the stage and check things before the next time there was a live performance. So playout went into that Scorpio as well, separate channels, and then into the ATEM Mini Extreme for encoding. And yes, we did use the actual 1/8" line input of the ATEM Mini. We did run into, classic gain structure problem. And so that first console going into the second console, we needed to have that be correct. And if you look at the back of the D-Live, the XLRs there was analog out of one console, analog into the next console. They say mic line input. And then if you look at the actual settings on the console itself, there's no switch for line. These are mic preamps. And so originally they just turned the gain down and then used this digital trim, and we had a microphone preamp that was receiving line level and was clipping, and then we were turning that down. So the first console was clean. Anything that the Bare Naked Ladies mixer was mixing, he heard as clean. Anything that Toad mixed was heard as clean, but Bare Naked Ladies mix through the Toad console to the stream was distorted. So we had the way that this console we discovered does line inputs is this pad switch right here. And that pad makes this into a line input. And that's just, their design of how they did the actual mixing. But it came back to, classic proper gain staging. We stopped, put some tone in, got tone to be clean at -20, got tone to be clean at -1, and now we knew we had proper gain staging through the system.
It's great that you guys all helped. That I understand was a benefit. And do you know the results? And can people help out those people in North Carolina and I suppose Florida who went through such difficulty?
Yeah, the
stream is still up, so you can go to sonicsunshinebenefit.com.
There you go. Great. Hope everybody supports those people. They've been through an incredibly difficult time and will continue for a long time. That was a lot of damage. Alex, you wanted to get in next?
Yeah, I think that the one thing that helped a lot, number one, is having Jeff there. Helped a lot by itself. It's a benefit. So a lot of us were pretty shorthanded. So, I'm putting together a bunch of other things that are all happening at the same time. I didn't have time to go over and look, and to be honest with you, wouldn't have had the skill set to figure that out. To figure that out quickly while we were making it work. The other thing I just can't stress more that is making sure that you try to get enough time to fight for more time. This is the kind of thing that if we had 4 hours of load-in time, it wouldn't have gotten handled, and the whole concert would have been crunchy. Or the Bare Naked Ladies would have been crunchy, very crunchy. It's really important when you're loading in to try to fight for as much time as you can get. We kept on extending the load-in time to earlier and earlier so that we'd have the time. And what happened is that now we're settled, everything's kind of put together. And we're still putting together some things, but we're and the other thing is to get back to what we were talking about earlier, is listening to the tail end. So we're listening to it, and what happened for me is that I had a Pix 240 that my headphones were actually Jeff's headphones were plugged into, and they were but we could listen to, this is what's going to the stream, this is the last step before it goes out, and so I can preview how does this sound? And by the way, the reason that we ran into the audio into the ATEM is that we wanted to make sure that the ISOs and the ATEM was distributing program to two different elemental links, and we didn't have enough distro to do it any other way. And so it was important to put the audio in there, which scared me a little. So, we were able to get it working with proper gain structure.
Chris, still in.
Yeah, just very quickly, just on the one console going into another console situation. If people are dealing with this out in the world, there's no way you're going to ever do that if you do not have a pad. Just like they were saying happen, you're absolutely going to be blowing those preamps. Most of these consoles will have like a digital actual output and input, so you can actually do just like through AES, and you can bypass preamps entirely. So that is definitely always the cleanest way to do this, because you're bypassing any option there of that overloading.
I will say that one thing that we're, especially in a concert environment, that we try to, I admit, avoid is, AES possibly. We avoid Dante and Maddie very quickly in a production environment, mostly because we end up with clocking errors. When you're coming in quick, trying to figure out what's going on when you have a very small amount of time to figure it out, and there's a lot of moving parts, we found that it was easier just to take analog. Just give me an analog signal. I'm just gonna keep it simple, because we've had problems where we have people that are very technical on both ends, and there's a clocking issue somewhere and we can't find it.
And in that situation, most of these that are doing like an AES protocols, for people that don't know, this is passed just through an XLR cable, and it just is a way to pass essentially a stereo feed, and it's really stable. There's no real clocking in it. So
I'm talking about like pulling like 90 channels or something like that.
Oh yeah.
It's
analog, copper wire, absolutely plugged in.
Jeff Francis, you want to get back in on this?
Yeah, and so where Alex was listening was basically this makeshift production switching area that is in the sound lock sort of into this hall, but it's open to the audio booth. It's open to the room where they're playing. Now, they weren't using a lot of PA, but there were monitors on stage. So, shoving headphones on and just hearing it was difficult to begin with, because it was a noisy environment of other things. And the crunch was definitely in the vocals, but the other place I heard it when Alex had me the headphones was the mix of the snare drum. The snare drum, since it was the thing that was really the loudest peak, it was getting crunched the most. And so the actual mix of the snare drum was way off. And I wandered in, and the Bare Naked Ladies mixer had monitors in his booth where he was actually mixing through speakers, and the mix sounded great, and the balance was correct, and the vocals were clean. So it was not just that it was crunch, but also the mix was thrown off, because that dynamic element of the snare drum, that was that loud impact, was getting crunched so much that it actually became much perceptively louder because it was distorted. So it threw the whole mix off.
And the other thing that I would say is to be particular, because there's a lot of people I think probably would have gone, well, it sounds okay, like it was like whatever, and being on the other end waving a flag, going, hey, this doesn't sound like, I could hear that it didn't sound good. I had to work on other things. I handed it to Jeff. Jeff was like, confirmed that it didn't sound good, and then went to work on figuring out what the pipeline was while I was able to kind of finish that up. And so it was, but being particular at the tail end, that you're the last, if you're doing the streaming, you're the last place it goes. You have to wave a hand if you don't think something's right. It's really easy not to do that.
Yeah, without late stage quality control, there will not be sometimes quality. Mickey.
Yeah, just to quickly tie this into something we spoke about earlier about the dynamic range in broadcast. In a pinch, I have used Sound Devices limiters. This was like back in the 7 Series days, to essentially slam against it and bring a front of house mix up to what the loudness that one would expect for a web broadcast. It's not the ideal way to do it, but it can be done if you just need to push things a little louder and get the dynamic range a little more controlled.
Yeah, and we did that. So, but with some of the things, the problem we had was between us was the Allen and Heath. So that was what was crunching. The Sound Devices itself, got hit a couple times just because some of the mixes were pretty heavy.
Yeah, and I'm talking about like purposefully slamming against Sound Devices limiters, because they're they're so incredible. They're quite transparent that you don't hear it like start to crunch up and sound. It takes a while before it starts to sound unnatural. And if ever you also have a Cooper field mixer around, Cooper, the limiters on Coopers, like I can't even tell that they're limiting.
Let's go to our next question.
Sorry, I had to retrieve my mouse. From Toronto, Canada, Rafat Syed wants to know, he says, I'm trying to embed audio into my camera setup. I'm using a Zoom L12 mixer, a Sony Alpha 7 camera, an ATEM Mini Pro, and vMix. I connected the XLR line output from the mixer to my ATEM mic input. Does this setup sound correct to you?
Mickey, help him out.
Yeah, you can do something similar to what Jeff mentioned during the last question, wherein they fed line level audio into an ATEM Mini's mini jack input. That would be an unbalanced connection, and also the input on ATEM Minis would be consumer line level. So there would certainly be not only a level mismatch there, but also an impedance mismatch. If you want something a bit more ideal, you might want to consider getting the Sony XLR K3M, which provides XLR inputs to Sony Alpha series cameras. This is switchable to line level, so you can get a proper level and also impedance match there. And this would be my go-to if you're limited to means to embed audio into your ATEM. This is what I'd go for.
Jeff Francis?
I would say it sounds correct if you're using the correct cable. So you want to be using something that is 2 XLRs wired to one 3.5 millimeter TRS. Remember that the tip is left channel signal, the ring is right channel signal, and the sleeve is the common ground. So you need a properly wired cable that's going to take the hot pin from the XLR of each of the 2 channels and go to the tip and the ring. If you're just wiring one XLR to that 1/8 inch connector, then you are not correct and you will get some crazy audio because you will have audio in positive polarity in the left channel and negative polarity, reverse polarity in the right channel.
Real quick, Mickey and then Marty.
Yeah, just so you know, like with the cable solution that Jeff mentioned, yes, you can do that in a pinch, but that would still keep the mismatch in terms of level there, because the board would be outputting plus 4 dBu, and then the ATEM would be expecting minus 10 dBV. And also that connection would, even though you have XLR at the board side, that entire connection would be an unbalanced connection because you're feeding into an unbalanced input. Another solution you might want to consider is getting a converter box, like say this Radial J ISO, which would take a balanced professional line level input and then spit out an unbalanced consumer line level signal at the other side.
Marty, real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to offer something similar to that. There are a number of products like this that convert between +4 balanced and minus 10 consumer. This is a device that used to be branded EbTech and is now Morley. It goes in both directions, and it goes from balanced. The quarter-inch connectors you can use either balanced or unbalanced, and there's a transformer inside, 2 transformers that do this. So it's a good way of converting from balanced to unbalanced.
Guy, do you have a quick ad?
Yeah, I would skip the ATEM audio, and I would just use the USB out of that Zoom. It's a USB out, and I would take that digital in, and I would do my stream from vMix. So I wouldn't even mess with the analog stuff. I would go pure digital.
Okay, you've got some options for your approach. We'll hope it works out well. Let's go to the next question.
From Chris Sabato in Albany, Oregon, he says, my X32 was getting large pops and spikes across all channels. It looked like an electrical surge. Changing the clock from the Dante card to internal fixed the issue. How is this related to the clock?
Marty, you want to help him out?
All right, so this is surely a clocking issue. And in Dante, it's important to look at the Dante controller to determine which Dante device is declared as the clock leader. And if the X32 is the clock leader, then its clock needs to be set to internal. Because it is generating the clock for all of the other Dante devices. If there's another device that, and this would be a hardware device rather than, say, a computer running DVS, whatever hardware device is declared the clock leader, that should be set to internal, and all the others should be set to external. That way, there's just one clock that's driving everything. And it's also kind of important to make sure that the sampling rates are the same on all devices. You might have a device that has a different sampling rate, and it may or may not work well, but getting that clock leader known and declared and following that clock is important.
Chris Jolin.
Yeah, I would say if that unit was working fine and then there was a big electrical surge and then you were having an issue and you switched, it's very possible that that unit itself actually just got hit with a surge and was not okay. I mean, the thing about production is all of this stuff is written out and theoretically all works, right? But all of us as production people go out into the world and you realize quickly it's just the open sea. Hypothetically, this stuff works, but that you have a myriad and huge spectrum of environmental issues or just conditions or whatever this stuff is. And so you kind of have to get outside of the box a little bit sometimes with this and just remember that not all things are exactly equal and working in the way that you think that they will. Very much clocking can give you all those issues, and it is important to have masters and following units all doing that. But yeah, remember, electricity can totally mess up a unit and another one can get through because of build quality. And I would check the unit after and see if it's still giving you issues, just on a standalone basis.
Mickey.
Yeah, this definitely feels like a clocking issue. Since you are switching the clock source on the board to the internal clock of the board as opposed to the card's clock, I would probably test setting the X32 itself or the X Dante card itself as the PTP V1 clock master, and setting the X32 to use the card as the clock source for the board. If you're still getting pops and clicks there, that may probably mean that there is something that is interrupting the PTP V1 in your network, or actually the other way around. If you no longer get pops and clicks with the X-Dante card being the master, then that means that there's something in the network that's affecting PTP V1.
Let's see if we can sneak in a quick discussion of the last one. Next question.
All right, last one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. It says Tascam has the Studio Bridge, which is a 24-track SD card recorder and audio interface for analog consoles. And your thoughts? And he has a link to the location.
Chris Gum.
Yeah, for me, I try and just bypass anything like this. Really, I started recording on a Roland VS1680, and it was just, it took 40 minutes to do something that is literally a click now. So for me, if this is USB coming off of a console to track, you can have a laptop instead, and then it's already tracked to a DAW, and you have full accessibility. So I would always be looking at it for that. And as far as interfaces go, there are so many options in a smaller footprint. That unit, if you look at it, this is a kind of a mixer-shaped unit that is like a desktop unit where you might want something in a rack. So,
Jeff Francis.
To me, this looks like they're trying to make an analog tape machine. This looks like an analog remote control for like a Studer A827, and so they're trying to go old school. So I don't think they're going to sell a lot of these.
Marty, real quick.
Yeah, if you must use an analog console, this is a device that can substitute for an analog multi-track recorder, and but it has so many limitations. It's only 24 tracks. It's only 48K. And although it can record internally or pass through to a computer for a DAW, it's $1,000. And why 24 tracks and why 48K? I wouldn't use it.
For those of you who have been interested in looking for a long way to help office hours, I am excited to announce that we have office hours shirts now, and they're very cool. They're just out on the streets. If you're interested in participating and playing, go to officehours.global/shop. And $20 out of each of the sales goes directly to support us. They're very cool shirts, and you can look cool by wearing them here at the top of the hour. And we're going to be coming back and talking about our next subject, so stand by. Wednesday is always our